Shouldn't be a long one.
All right, get this going. All right, good afternoon. It is 5 p.m. Tuesday, July 8th. It's a special city council meeting workshop. I'd like to call the meeting to order and acknowledge that the press and public were duly notified of the meeting in accordance with the Freedom of Information Act. Nicole, will you mind doing roll call?
Sure. Councilmember Carroll.
Here.
Councilmember Myers. Councilmember Pierce.
Here.
Councilmember Goshen. Councilmember Ward.
Here.
Councilmember Hahn.
Here.
Councilmember Streetman.
Here.
Councilmember Anderson.
Here.
Mayor Pounds.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. First item, citizens' comments.
Mr. Josh Hoosier.
Thank you. Josh Hooser, 6 Sandwedge Lane. I want to talk to you tonight about the hate crimes ordinance that former council member Rice, I think, proposed or drafted. I'm not sure who drafted it. But I don't know if any of you all know this, but I am gay and I live on the island. And so I can speak to that experience. I felt almost compelled to do this. I also, in my former life, used to be an LGBT rights lawyer, so I actually used to draft these for cities and advise them and do all that stuff. So I actually have a lot of experience on it. One of the ordinances that I drafted for a city up north had an issue because they had a local hate crimes ordinance, but they wanted to expand it to LGBT people. But there was a really large Orthodox Jewish population, so they were having a very hard time with that and were going back and forth. So this is a very complex issue. But I read it and it said that the city wants to value and protect diversity and they want to be welcoming. And, you know, I got to thinking, we don't really have a lot of diversity on this island. Maybe with visitors, with residents, it's not. I don't know a lot of gay people here, a lot of gay parents. As far as I know, we're the only ones at the school, me and my husband. But I read the citizen who wrote the comments about their flag being taken down. And I just thought it was, you know, I felt compelled to talk because it's not always easy being gay. Here with being the only one, it's a hurdle. In fact, somebody, as I'm considering running for office again, told me that my biggest hurdle is me being gay, my biggest hurdle being elected. Some people I've talked to about that here. So we don't have any LGBT elected officials. I know we have a lot of visitors. We obviously have residents. But, you know, this is a really interesting issue. So I just want to kind of go through this really quickly. It said that we're one of 2 states. We're actually only one of 3 states. Arkansas has something, but it only protects religion. It doesn't protect race, sexuality, anything like that. It just protects religion. So we're actually one of 3. This says one of 2. The other thing that I wanted to talk to you about was basically what this is enhancement. So you violate the code. This would be an enhancement. So if somebody violates the code, and then you can prove that it's with an intent to intimidate, which is kind of hard to prove. I guess with the pride flag case, you can prove that. But I was going through the code. Some of the crimes here don't have sentences in the code itself, and maybe I can talk to the chief about that later. But I was reading through it. I thought that was really interesting. So it says this is a crime, but it doesn't say what happens to it. So I would look through that too, because this is an enhancement. But if the underlying crime doesn't have a sentence, how can you enhance that? So you might want to, if you're going to do something like this, you might want to look at the statute, the ordinances on the underlying crimes. The other thing that I thought was interesting is it says that the court can impose fines that go to nonprofits. What nonprofits is that going to? You might want to look at that too. So it's not a cute runaround to funnel money to special interest groups. I also think, you know, if you adopt something like that, like this, it does send a strong message that Isle of Palms is welcoming, but it really is just kind of a message. This is what I would tell people. It's kind of feel-goody. Really, this is more appropriate at the state level. The federal government already has protections. I actually helped fight to get those at the federal level, but this really is kind of more of a state-level issue. So if you do want to adopt something like this, I really would look at this. How does it mesh with the current ordinances, which would be what's called an underlying crime, and then look at the punishment to see practically what that means, and is this what your intention is? So ultimately, I mean, I'm supportive of something like this. I think it's a great message to send, especially in a place that doesn't have a history of diversity. I just wouldn't just rush to do this because it makes you feel good. look at it and actually figure out what somebody gets charged, they go to court, they get sentenced. What does that look like? That would be my 2 cents. Thank you.
That's all.
Thank you, Nicole. Next item, special presentations. We don't have any tonight. Next, Douglas, you'll do the dashboard of city operations and short-term rental report.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. On the city's dashboard, you will see that we're currently now 3 down in City Hall. We have hired a permit clerk, still have vacant deputy administrator, zoning administrator, and we have becoming a vacancy for the building official on the 21st of this month, so a few more weeks. Police department currently has 2 officers vacant. May now be, is it 3 now? Yeah, it just became 3 maybe yesterday. Fire showing one paramedic. That could also be 2, or is that, I think it is 1, still 1? Okay. Rec has 1 parks and grounds maintenance supervisor.
Douglas, has there been any impact in the time to turn around in the planning and building for permits and things of that nature?
I think it's starting to be impacted, yeah, a little bit. And I would just say that we are actually investigating the option of outsourcing building code administration to a third party. We've had a very challenging time filling the building official role. There are at least 2, if not more, operations that operate locally that just handle building code administration. We're analyzing that now.
Is that a big part of Matt's job, or?
That's more Williams' job.
Williams, okay.
Yeah, zoning is such kind of a niche thing.
So they do the inspections and? Okay.
Yeah, issue the permits. We're meeting with firms that do that type of work now, continuing also to seek applicants for that role. But we're considering that option, and I think we'll at least do that in the short term. We don't think that there will be a new building official in place by the time William leaves on the 21st. So we're prepared to at least do it in the short term. We may do it longer than short term.
Would they work out of our offices?
No, they work remotely. They're currently, firms are doing it for Ravenel, Hollywood, commercial construction in Mount Pleasant. So the firms are operating locally, but they would not physically, they would obviously show up to do the inspections, but they wouldn't hold an office physically in the building.
So the applicants would still come to City Hall, submit the application, that would be forwarded to?
All of the paperwork
Yeah.
would happen online.
And it's that way today.
Yeah, pretty much is that way now.
Okay.
And we're fully staffed in those areas that handle the paperwork. I mean, all of that's
Well,
in good shape.
we're about to be, yes.
Yeah.
One of the roles we've
Okay,
just filled
That makes sense,
is the paperwork.
yeah.
So we're trying to get that organized. Like I said, we will at least be doing this kind of as a pilot in the short term to outsource building code administration.
I think that's a good idea. You get probably better experts because they're fully utilized all the time.
Yeah, a little bit of a concern about just constant monitoring. They certainly would show up, do the inspections you ask them for, but they're not kind of on patrol throughout the day. So they're going to be trade-offs, but we'll
I mean,
work through
William was
that.
pretty on top of like
Yeah.
block coverage and materials being
Yeah.
used and height, and before people got too far down. If you're waiting to the official inspection, it might be
Yeah.
problematic. yeah.
He also
He was on top of it.
He also knows every permit that's issued, so he's going down the street. Something is happening, he knows intuitively that doesn't have a permit. He pulls over, stops it, gets it in line. I think that gets diminished when you go to a third party, but we'll try to work through that.
And we have enough work on the island to keep somebody busy full-time.
Yes, yeah, even, he is averaging 16 inspections a day. He's doing more inspections than a lot of municipalities, 3-4 times our size. He's busy. I would also just draw your attention to the short-term rental numbers. You can see that we're at 1608 currently licensed. There's about 30 in the queue, so that brings us to 1640. But this number, of course, will build throughout the year. We've just started a new licensing year, so those will build throughout the year.
Do you know what that number was this time last year?
I don't have it handy.
It's 1610.
1610?
And what was the highest that we got?
Last year was 1784.
Okay.
So it's down slightly. Ever so slightly. It's pretty much steady.
Yeah. Any other questions on the dashboard of the short-term rental update?
Yeah, and then we've got departmental reports attached, if there are any questions for department heads. Anybody? Douglas, sorry, did I cut you off? Anything
No,
else? You
no,
good?
that's it.
Just in time. Deborah, financial review, end of our fiscal year. Hard to believe.
Yes, sir. I just want to briefly cover, because these numbers are very, very preliminary. As you know, that we don't get final numbers until around October when we have our audit. There is still a lot of revenue to be recognized, specifically in tourism dollars. But just a brief overview, the general fund, we're at $15.3 million. That's about 103% over our annual budget. There's still money yet to come in from the local option sales tax, as well as insurance licenses and state accommodation fees. So there's still revenue to collect there. We,
What's the holdup with the A-tax money?
we rely on the state and county.
So
This
Yeah,
is not
we-
any
we're-
different than
Right,
prior
we're,
years.
we're at their
It
mercy.
always lags.
Okay.
Expenditures, year-to-date, we have about $15.3 million spent that's like about 95% of the budget. Expenses are still coming in, and they will be posted to June as we continue to get invoices in. There's also a payroll accrue that we do at the end of the fiscal year. Once payroll runs today, we'll have those numbers, and we'll accrue half of this pay cycle into FY '25. Overall, citywide, we about $29.4 million, which is 103% of the budget. And as I stated, there are a lot of tourism funds that have not arrived yet, and I'll kind of comb through those when we go through the tourism schedules.
Deborah, do you know, will that all pretty much settle down? Yeah, this is like a year-end close, so in another month, will most of those accruals be in by then?
Normally, normally August is when we'll see pretty much all the income.
Yeah, so that'd be a month from now.
Yeah, oh, right, yeah.
So would it be too much to ask is if you get an updated year-end at the next workshop, could you bring that as well? I know we'll be into the first part of fiscal year, but it'd be nice to see how that all kind of shook out.
Yes, yes.
That'd be great, thanks.
I surely will. But we'll definitely get some revenues in August, but we'll probably get some in September as well.
And Deborah, real quick, I know I saw the initial audit letter. Are they scheduled yet for their timing?
They are scheduled. They won't arrive until October.
Okay.
Yes, sir. So on the second page, I just want to note that the interest rate is still steadily decreasing. However, just in talking to some other municipalities, the LGIP is still providing the best interest rate for the investments. And year-to-date, we've received about where are my notes? 2.2 million dollars in interest income. So that is really good interest on the funds that we have. onto the revenue, onto the tourism schedules. We received about, well, $54,000 in municipal accommodation tax funds. I called the county because that number was so low and asked them to take a look at the numbers and make sure that we're getting all the revenues that are allocated to us, because there were some, we still don't have a true way to reconcile what comes from the state and what comes from the county compared to what comes from the county, compared to what we even do out here. So hopefully when we get our financial analysts, that would be a project that they could assist us with, getting a reconciliation tool to do that. But in calling the county, apparently there were at least two companies that they didn't have on the county's report that were on the state report. And so we have not received funds from at least two companies. Of course, there's a lag in when other companies pay, but
When you say companies, you're talking like Airbnb, VRBO, or?
any business, any business that pays accommodation tax, it could be anyone.
Deborah,
So-
do you recall if did it lag like that last year at this time? I mean, like last year was 159,000.
Right, it was 158,000, and that's what
158,000.
caused, you're right, that's what
But was
caused
there a
the alarm.
similar lag last year at the same time? I mean, right now, we're showing 54.6. Did you have that same sort of phenomenon
Well,
last year?
there were companies that always pay in arrears, there are always companies that don't pay on time, but this was substantial. This was definitely a substantial
More
notice
than
of,
normal.
more than normal. Just this month alone was more than normal. But they assured me that they were going to go back and look at the numbers, and they were going to rectify all of the funds that were owed to the city. And so they said that we would see that the first week of July, and it's the first week of July, but I have not seen it yet. So hopefully it comes in this week. For the state accommodation tax, we're still missing, the last quarter, and we hopefully anticipate getting just as much as we did last year, since we're already at 12% higher than we were this time last year. The pass-through, same thing, we're still missing one quarter. We anticipate getting, exceeding what we received last year, just because we're trending at 13% of the previous years. Hospitality taxes, we need to record at least June's. That, for some reason, is only 2% higher than last year. So I'm not really sure why our hospitality taxes are lower. I know that people are paying. I know that they're paying on time, but I don't know why they're reporting less than we saw in 2024.
You're coming off an all-time high in 2024 for hospitality.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, 2023, definitely, for sure.
Well, 24 was 1.5.
24 was higher too, yeah,
I
but,
mean, 2% growth, not so bad.
But the sales tax is a small increase too. And that might be could that possibly mirror the hospitality tax in terms of just percent growth?
you're saying sales? Oh, you're looking, which one are you looking at?
Local option.
I don't know whether they're comparable or not. I mean, in terms of the percent increase in. Goes this, no, I'm looking at the wrong number, sorry. No, local. Sorry, looking at the wrong number.
Beach preservation is the same as what we talked about with the Muni A, because they're, it's half of what we receive for that. And then the local option tax, we are missing 3 months of revenue. And we totally relying on the county, not sure what's taking them so long to fund that money through to the city, but
They pay, that's not a quarterly payment, so they're.
No,
they're
that's
literally-
monthly.
So they're literally 3
3
months.
months behind,
That's,
yes. they're normally 2 months, at least 2 months, is what I've seen since I've been here for the last 2 years. They're always 2 months behind, but they're 3 months behind, which is getting
None of that's been accrued
longer.
or anything, or has it been accrued, or?
It has not.
Nothing, so
It's-
that's all.
It has not. We don't accrue until we,
Quantified cat do.
yeah. Actually, this is the numbers.
50 grand or something.
So, that's all I have, unless anybody has any questions regarding these project worksheets. I don't have anything else.
Questions for,
The only question I had on the shell management one, we don't have to go to the sheet, but well, how does the actual payment coming, because we've completed the project, but should we see a $600,000 inbound from Wild Dunes, and do we bill them, or are they waiting for us, or is that a,
I think we've
is that a
received that check.
process? Okay,
We received that in June, yeah, in
I think
June.
we just got it.
okay, all right, good.
anything else for Deborah? Deborah, thank you very much. Douglas, you want to take us through
Yeah.
procurement?
Yep. The next 4 items on your agenda are procurement for the police department. These are all, the first 3 are budgeted. The first one is 2 ATVs and a trailer at $20,364. I would just say that one, because it's in the budget, it's under $25,000. That's under my purview to purchase that, so that's underway now. That will shift to being a report to you all at the council meeting. The next 2 are police trucks, $49,077. These are all off of the state purchasing contract. You will note that in the budget, those are budgeted at $67,000, but we still need to do the upfit on those for the lights and the stripes and the, so those will get to being very close to the budgeted amount of $67,000.
That's just vehicle purchase.
Vehicle purchase is
49,
49, yep. That's, first one is a truck at 49,000, the next 2 are SUVs at 46,940 each. And then for your discussion on here is the replacement of an additional SUV that was wrecked on the connector, and we anticipate getting $15,000 back from the insurance, and we wanted to see if council would consider funding that unbudgeted difference between the insurance premium and the $46,900.
Just curious, what happened?
The officer that was driving the vehicle was responding to a call for service in reference to, well, he was on the connector and he was responding to a call for service and attempted to do a U-turn and did not give ample time before conducting that U-turn and turned, and the vehicle thought he was pulling to the right, and they went to go around to the left as he turned, and they T-boned him. He was at fault.
Everybody okay?
Everybody's okay, no injuries, just a vehicle that had about 80,000 miles on it. That's part of the reason I think it was totaled, and some damage to the, I believe there's some frame damage to it as well.
Douglas, do you anticipate where you might get the additional $32,900?
Deborah, where we get the additional $32,000?
Yeah, I mean, we got multiple
Yeah,
She's
we
working her
could,
back.
we'll,
Just get that by the council meeting,
yeah,
that'd be
we'll
great.
report back where that could come from.
The total on that is not going to be 46.9, isn't it going to be closer to 64,000?
It will, correct, after it's outfitted in its entirety. The purchase would be 46, but then, yeah, we expect it would get close to 64.
Okay.
And Chief, you salvaged some equipment from the wrecked vehicle also, did you?
We did, yes, sir.
Repurpose it.
We took whatever equipment we could salvage out of it. The downside is it was a Dodge Durango, and we have learned from our past experiences that Dodge Durangos don't make good for patrol because of the placement of the batteries. It turns into an $800 battery change with a Dodge Durango as a patrol car. So it would be a different type of vehicle, and it'd probably be a Ford. And we will do everything in our power to find the lowest one on the lot. Sometimes we get lucky and we can find the year before model and get it for less. And so we'll do that. That $15,000 pretty much covers your upfitting for equipment and marking the vehicle. Chief, stay there.
Stay
Yeah.
there. We'll go through the capital projects and come back. We're ready to move on to
Yes, sir.
capital projects. So I'm going to go through the list. I will hit on just those projects that there's an update for, which is most of them, but not all of them. The big one and really the bulk of our work at City Hall has been this kind of time-critical Waterway Boulevard multi-use path. As you will recall, we have been trying to secure 21 agreements, hold harmless agreements that, from the adjacent property owners. In your packet, it says that we are lacking 3, but 2 have indicated a willingness to execute that agreement. Happy to report tonight that all 3 that are outstanding have expressed a willingness to execute the agreement. So
Excellent.
still need to get those in our hands, but we have kind of a thumbs up and a heads nod from all of those adjacent owners, which is good. So we are also working with both the Wild Dunes ownership and the Wild Dunes contractor that's in place now, trying to get from the contractor updated pricing. There have been some modifications to the project as a result of the time. The golf course itself is slightly different, so the plans are slightly different. Some of the details around some of the property owners has changed, so there's a little bit of modification to the plans. Those modifications are being designed, we'll get pricing, and then ultimately we need to get the final green light from the ownership. So it is our hope that we would have updated pricing by your council meeting for you all to consider. If those puzzle pieces can fall in place, we think that would have the project able to proceed probably in August. So a lot of work on that one particular project. The Phase 4 drainage project at Palm Boulevard between 38th and 41st. We did have a bit of a win with the DOT has agreed. They were indicating a willingness to allow us to do the work, but they were requiring that we took over maintenance and perpetuity of the entire system.
They've agreed to do their job.
They've agreed to maintain the system that we're providing to them, which was nice. So that project is underway with permitting. We're hoping to get that project started in the fall of 2025. You will recall that this project was being done kind of dovetailing in with a water and sewer project. That water and sewer project came in, I think, 2 times over budget. It was, I think the budget was $5 million and it came back at $10 million. So the Water and Sewer Commission is kind of scrambling on either scaling that project back, trying to get additional grant money to complete it. So we're a little bit uncertain if the water and sewer project will happen. And this is obviously independent, but it was planned to be done at the same time, roughly. Marina dredging, we did receive in the last month a permit from the state for that work. We're still lacking the Army Corps permit. They have requested additional information. We've provided that back to them, and we're hopeful that that's just in the works. So things are moving along well for that. The Isle of Palms County Park emergency vehicle access, this one too had really just a small amount of work that's been dangling now for 2 or 3 months. Everything now is complete with the exception of an electrical connection to the gate, and then the gate programming itself. Once it's energized, we would do the programming. So the gate is not functional, but the path is completely in and complete and looks good.
Hey, Douglas, can I just
Yeah,
make one
sure.
request? I went back and I was looking up, this has to do with the waterway project.
Yes.
And there was this schedule, and it happened to be, I think it was right at a little over a year ago, when we had all of the phases, and I think it came up to $5.952 million for the whole project. And if we're going to be updating that, I don't know, I'll give you the schedule, but can you just pass that down? If that's something that, if you're updating the estimates and kind of taking a forward look on this, since it's been a year, maybe take a look and see what the whole all-in is going to look like if we're going to be having to reapprove this.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So at your council meeting, yeah, we can update all of the numbers,
Yeah.
including the various phases.
Yep, that'd be
Yeah,
great.
Certainly do that.
Okay, thanks.
So county park, we have to have that done by next month. Beach maintenance and restoration, the city's two primary projects, the supplemental work and the shoal management work are complete. Unfortunately, this past weekend, we know that significant damage was done to the shoal management project. Stephen was visiting it last night. He's going to report back with just the results of his visit and if there are any recommendations. But we do know that it was hit pretty significantly with the storm that never fully formed, but it definitely gave us high surf, very high winds. So it took its toll on that part of the project. And then the 21st Avenue sidewalk repair and extension, they started that work yesterday. That sidewalk's been, it's been demolished, so they're there, they're working. We think that should be just three or 4 weeks. They have, again, assured us that it will be minimum disruption, and we've been trying to notify people of the disruption, and hate that it happened, and literally the day after the 4th of July, but it's just the way things seem to happen. Any questions on capital projects?
Yeah, I do. I know that we pass on not giving any updates on anything that doesn't have any progress made on it, but quite honestly, I don't believe that should be the case. I think on capital projects, we'll report something on them every month, even when there's no activity. Marina Public Dock and Green Space, and also the Dominion Energy conversation that was had back in February, this really had no progress. So those items, if they're out of sight, they're out of mind. Just wondering if there's any kind of update, any kind of movement or anything that we can talk about progress or lack thereof of the marina parking and green space, and also the discussions with Dominion on the other item. I'm assuming we don't have any
No,
because
yeah, we don't have an update. I mean, there's no, other than what's in the packet.
no meeting scheduled, no interaction with the other parties.
On either of those, no. No, there's nothing scheduled. We actually had the same discussion this morning in the Public Facilities Committee about the public dock of kind of what to do with that. We may be at a kind of stalemate of the tenants. We may be at an impasse of not being able to do anything there.
Fair enough.
So I have a quick question. The 21st Avenue sidewalk,
Yes.
that's on the ocean side of Palm Boulevard to the ocean, right?
No, that is between the S curve of Palm Boulevard back to Waterway Boulevard. So really from the church back,
It was going to be much wider, right?
yes.
And concrete.
Yeah, it's been an asphalt, I mean, it's in horrific condition. It's an
Yeah.
asphalt, very narrow. It will be a concrete, wider
It'll
sidewalk.
go all the way to Waterway.
Correct.
All right, it includes the section of the S curve, the
It's-
extension of 21st Avenue all the way to Palm. Is that
I
correct?
think it's just
front of
the
the-
asphalt. I think it just starts at the church and goes down.
Will the crosswalk?
Which church?
Right there, 21st, will that be affected?
Sorry, say again?
The crosswalk at 21st Avenue, it just, now it's right on the back end of the Lutheran Center.
Yes.
Will that be moved to the S curve? Or will it stay the same?
No. It's just, it really is just a removal and replacement of that existing sidewalk that was asphalt and in very poor condition.
Okay, great, thanks.
But Douglas and Robert, you may know, I thought their scope of work included tying some around the Lutheran Center
Yeah.
to the concrete path on Palm.
It actually starts right at the curve, adjacent from the 21st Avenue beach path. So as it curves, there's a fire hydrant right there. That's where it starts, runs all the way down to the water.
So really right at the Lutheran Center.
So where you cross to go to the ocean at 21st?
Yes.
Okay. So it
Okay,
does
so-
go down.
In front of the
I wasn't
Lutheran
quite sure of
Center
that.
you're talking about, right? Okay, that asphalt section. That's what I
Well,
was
the
hoping.
asphalt is down 21st. All that's already concrete in front, around the Lutheran Center. Most of it's concrete.
There's actually asphalt in 2 locations.
Yeah.
From the Lutheran retreat, then it switches to concrete by the church, and then goes back to asphalt all the way down the water.
But it's new from Palm Boulevard at the beach all the way to Waterway.
It will be.
Will be.
Yeah.
How wide will it be?
5 feet.
Is it maybe 3 now? Yeah.
Yeah, it's not 3, yeah. Wow, that's a big improvement.
Yeah.
Thanks.
May not be as bad as Waterway Boulevard path, but it's a close second. It's bad. Yeah.
Yeah, nothing's ever been done to it, that I can remember.
It's a hurdling event.
It's going to be historic pretty soon.
Douglas, anything else on projects or anybody
No.
else?
Nope.
Other questions? Next is strategic plan, policy initiatives and priorities, livability, discussion of engaging a traffic engineer to conduct a traffic study.
Yeah, I would give an update here, and we can, this is coming from the Public Safety Committee. They had Stantec available at their meeting, and the committee talked with Stantec about the feasibility of a number of things. And I guess, first of all, in this proposal is studying the issue of gridlock, when it's happening, what's causing it to happen, if there are pinch points that are creating the issue that could be improved. The idea that came up really during the meeting was this idea of treating those known busy weekends like a sporting event, where you know that tens of thousands of cars are going to be released all at the same time. And the idea of whether or not the DOT would be willing to do, I think we all have known that if there were physical improvements, widening lanes, changing turn lanes, things of that nature, that those could be studied, but also the idea of temporary improvements to deal with those episodes. So the idea would be, we know that Memorial Day is going to be a busy weekend. It's gearing up to be a busy weekend. Could we go to the DOT and request permission to use the 2 outgoing lanes on the Isle of Palms connector as a means to allow people to get off? This is what they do for football games. The DOT has a little bit of a history of allowing these. Stantec has held, they went back after that meeting and had a series of meetings with the DOT on about the likelihood of approving a situation like this. Preliminary indications are that if the data supported it, if the plan was, an agreed upon plan that they could work with, they could see a path forward where they would issue these kind of special permits to allow us to change the traffic pattern to get the traffic off of the island. The expense to do that, to study the traffic and what they're including in their proposal, is installing a series of cameras that would capture vehicles, bikes, in the 2 intersections, and the intersection at the base of the connector, and then also at the intersection of the S-curve. They would install cameras there. They would capture that data in terms of counts. They would also deploy a series of drones throughout the same busy day to witness at the intersections. And the Public Safety Committee talked about studying all the way down to 35th. But Stantec has gone back and talked to their drone operator, and they've said just through their equipment, it would be impractical to study past 25th. So this proposal has them going from the connector to 25th throughout that day, capturing imagery to allow them to study the problem. It also has up to 2 engineers on site during that event to kind of have an eyewitness account of exactly what's going on. And then kind of the report back in their proposal is that they would take this information, study it, come back with recommendations, have meetings with the DOT on the feasibility of these, kind of event-type permits, and then come back to us with recommendations as to what we may be able to do. So the cost to do that, I think it was either
29.5, I think.
$29,500.
Dollars?
Yes.
Douglas, do you know if they're, or, and Chief, and I guess, Jan, were they going to stop right at the connector, or are they going to go towards the post office at all? Because there's
They're going to study that.
another bit of volume that comes from that direction.
Yes, they were going to study
Part of the
the flow in and out of that intersection.
Okay, great.
So I don't think they were going to go, probably not as far up as the post office, but the backup at that actual intersection. So probably, pavilion.
But they're not gonna study anything over the connector, or like that first traffic light that was, where, you had one lane on the connector.
Yes, and I will say that
Sorry.
in preliminary discussions, they did indicate that they felt that it would be advantageous to the city if the traffic could be, so this is, this would all come from the study, but what they're thinking is that they would get 2 lanes of traffic going up the connector, give them enough kind of landing room to get up to speed, and then cause them to merge, kind of merge back into 1 lane of traffic at whatever you could get up to, 40 miles an hour, 35 miles an hour, but they felt like that throughput would be achieved by getting them up to speed and then back into 1 lane. They felt like if we wanted, kind of in a perfect scenario, they would do it so that it would be 2 lanes all the way to where it's permanently 2 lanes in Mount Pleasant. But in order to do that, I think they had already calculated the distance. It was kind of miles of additional setup, which they felt like would make it cost prohibitive. They also recognized that as soon as you pivot into another community's jurisdiction, you have to have their cooperation. They would kind of have the ability to stop or keep you from being able to do it. So I think their preliminary kind of gut instinct is that they would want to merge it into 1 lane before you get to the far side of the connector, to avoid kind of the pitfalls of having to do it 2 lanes all the way out. But that's the type thing that they said, this is the type of information that would inform, we would learn the answer to that through our study. But that's their hunch.
I got a question. We all remember the Pearlman Bridge that went across the Cooper River. It was 3 lanes. And it was always said it was going to be 1 lane going one way and 2 lanes going the other. And we remember they had X marks above the lanes. And when I moved here in '86, until they replaced it in 2005, those lanes never reversed. And how was this study, they kept saying it'd be too expensive. The police chief probably would know more about the technical aspect than I would. But I remember they never did reverse, although that was what the bridge was built for.
Yeah.
And so,
And I guess I would add that Stantec is making us aware that it would be a lot of manpower.
Yeah.
If we were to want to do this, and the study supported it, that there would be significant manpower required to do it. So this would certainly be a question for, and we did talk a little bit about third-party vendors who would be able to do things like set the cones into place. There would be an expense to do that, obviously, but he felt like even if a third party set up all the lanes, set up the cones to make it happen, there'd be an expense to that, but at the end of the day, there would need to be a police presence, which is always our challenge in those busy days of waving the traffic into them. So it would be an undertaking to if we wanted to get to a point where we could deal with these bumper days. Could be a tool that we had, but it'd be complex to get it there and get it implemented.
And would some of the output be that, I think what I'm hearing is, one, Stantec needs the metrics and the data to be able to make a case to the DOT.
That's
to even
correct.
consider this. Secondly, if they provide us a report, it's going to give us very specifics about, you need to change these lights for this amount of period of time, and et cetera. Or you're going to need to manpower this up in a certain distance across the connector, which then can be quantified as to how much it's going to cost. Both.
That's correct.
That's the output.
That's exactly right.
And if we do nothing, we're just going to suffer the increasing volumes with no option for any solutions at this point in time.
But Doug, I mean, this, what I'm hearing too, so 30,000 is the starting point. If their recommendation comes back and says, do all this, 2 lanes out, temporary, I mean, that's pricey. And are we talking about every weekend? Are we talking about every day? Are we talking about 3 to 6? You know, I mean, a lot of questions we all have on when the timing would be. But, I mean, Chief, I mean, there's no way we could have the manpower to pull this off. It would have to be an outsourced arrangement, it sounds like.
Especially for the cones, and as far as staffing goes, there's a lot of conversations about treating it like a football event, and I've heard those several times since I've been here. And I've had the ability to work the traffic at a football event in Columbia, and I've seen the resources it takes to do that. Now, that's a much bigger area that we're covering and
In a
more
finite
vehicles.
time.
Correct. This would be, I'd be curious to hear what they said, but I would go into it, my first gut tells me, are we just extending the problem where we've got the merge on the connector still, and then you're still going to have the issue that backs up? I don't know. That would be, it will be very expensive with the personnel. That's my biggest concern.
What is it, I mean, I'm trying to get order of magnitude. Is very expensive, 10,000 an event or 100,000 an event, or we don't know? Because we don't know. And,
Yeah.
no, and I was going to say, and you know, in the event that it's going to get pricey, you know, can we maybe seek some funding sources other than Isla Palms has to pay for it all again? Yeah, I mean, we're going to be trying to help a lot of the people that are not living here to return home. So maybe there are other sources of funding. I mean, I feel like we need to do something. I don't know if this is a solution, but it might be something.
And I think the question about what is expensive is what are we talking about? Just Saturdays, just Fridays, just Sundays, all day, certain hours? I mean, a football game is definable mostly.
It is. You know what time the game is ending, and you know what time most people are leaving, depending on, I mean, we plan that it's a losing game and that they're leaving just after halftime.
Talking games on the score.
I'm a Gamecock fan, but I'm just saying.
We tend to leave early.
That would be something I think Stan Tech could really tell us, is if we set it up the way they're talking, what personnel are they talking about? What would DOT expect from us as far as personnel go? Because they're going to want bodies there to help guide it. And I think, I don't have that expertise. I think that's something that Stan Tech would be able to give us the answer as to what that might look like.
I'm not hearing anything about Mount Pleasant in any of this conversation.
Well,
And they
you're not.
are a very important part of this, because at the top of the connector is their jurisdiction. And then it moves on down, and that light at rifle range is a huge issue. I mean, I think that we're throwing money away if we don't have them at the table to figure all this out together.
If we kept it on the bridge itself, from the top of the bridge to the end where concrete meets asphalt, that's a shared jurisdiction. We have jurisdiction there
Okay, so
too.
shared, but still.
But once you get to that asphalt, if you wanted to truly be successful, you want those 2 lanes to merge, to continue into where they have it. And I feel like we'd want Mount Pleasant to be involved in that for sure, because it's going to impact them in some capacity.
That's where we'd actually see some success, is if we could carry it all the way through, because Rifle Range Road already has a 2-lane two through lanes approach and a left turn lane. The asphalt's probably out there to make it happen, but cooperation with Mount Pleasant has been difficult so far. What I see in all of this is an opportunity to get some information, but I agree with you, Mr. Mayor, that this is a little bit high for what they're offering. What I would like to see as well is that they're collecting traffic count data out there. I would hope it would be turning movement counts and not just hourly volumes that we could get most of from the DOT already. And that using those turning movement counts, do a signal analysis, a signal timing analysis for our Palm 14th Avenue intersection. Then we would get something for it that we could use to retime that signal for busy weekends. So that would be something that we could use for the summer. My other observation is that if you look at the counts over the past, the summer, since May, you'll see that every single weekend, we've hit traffic volumes approaching or at 30,000 vehicles a day coming across the connector, which is just incredibly high. It's unbelievable unless you understand exactly how our traffic flows. And that we don't get gridlock all the time. So we know the days when that appears to happen, and it's the weekend, it's minimum two busy weekends for sure. July 4th, Memorial Day, we saw it consistently. July 4th, a little bit less this time. If you have evidently a gale force winds and tropical storm warnings over the weekend, it tends to cut the traffic down to about 25,000 vehicles rather than 30. So we've got some good data that we can use where we're not talking about all the time. We're not talking about every weekend even. We're talking about, for starters, we could try it for 1 or 2 weekends that we know we're busy, see how it works, see how much it costs, and then maybe go from there, either scale it up or scale it back down if we need to.
Let me ask Chief, what's your reaction to just the control of our light?
In our experience, when we take control of the light and we just change the light function, we actually run into more issues when we do that. It can be done, but then you get to resetting it and everything, and it actually, the traffic signal itself flows well. The issue really comes from the points where everybody's trying to get onto Palm and work their way to the light. Even on July 4th, we did not take over control that night of the light. We let it cycle like it normally does, and it only backed up a few times at the light. Everything else was flowing well. We moved cars every other direction, but we left the light kind of working its own way, and it really doesn't back up that often. The issue really seems to be the merging, and then there's on Palm going this way to what Councilman Pierce was talking about, there's a heavy stack that will get over here into this center lane that actually blocks the turn lane for every other street beyond 14th and the connector. So it's really just comes, that one flows well. It'll back up a couple times on those busy weekends when I've watched it, but we try not to mess with the light. It actually works very smoothly. And the light at the rifle range, as I said last month, when I was watching it, there were times when we had a backup here and there were no cars moving through that intersection. It was empty. Nobody even going to that light at rifle range and the connector. It just flowed very smoothly. Jimmy?
Well, I agree with Blair when he said that we need to get Mount Pleasant at the table. And at the last council meeting, I mentioned the fact that I think it's a state problem, and it's a county problem, and it's also a Mount Pleasant problem. It's not just our problem. And the solutions among those are finances, and I don't see how it's fair that we would have to brunt the expense of the whole thing. I would like to go back and just ask the question one more time about the Pyramid Bridge, and I was thinking about it. I think it opened in 1966. I got here in '86. They thought it was going to work with 3 lanes. I always thought it was kind of a mistake, and after it opened, they had the same idea, and that 2 lanes, and they can switch it back and forth. And my recollection is that there were a lot of accidents involved because there was a median in the middle. And people, I'm not a traffic engineer, I'm not any kind of engineer at all, but I think people are going to be confused. If we start messing with reversing the lanes on just certain days, certain hours, like 4 days a year, the cones are a great idea, but they're not going to stop a head-on collision.
We're not talking about
I'm not
reversing
finished. I'm not finished. I'm just worried about the safety of the issue, and I'm worried about the finances. And I would like to do some research and report back and find out why the pyramid experiment never worked.
Well, we're not talking about reversing a lane. The through lane would off of the island would remain the same through lane. We're talking about taking the bike ped lane on one side and repurposing it for through traffic. So we need to make sure that there are no pedestrians or bicyclists that get on that lane, and we can probably do that at each end of the bridge.
That is your solution, and I've heard it, Douglas spell it out too. But there's other people on the island that think the solution is to go back to the old configuration where we had emergency vehicle lane in the middle. And my idea is that could be used for emergency lanes, so people could just pull to the right on each side, go back to the original configuration. And also, it could be used for CARTA buses on the weekends. And that would increase the CARTA traffic and might make a small dent in our day traffic. But I've spoken enough, but I would like to look further into that Perlman experiment and why it didn't work.
But that reversible lane in the center, unless, in most instances, they are frowned upon by traffic engineers because of the reason that you said. There's too much danger of a head-on collision.
But don't you think that, and I'm sorry to drag this out, but there could be some confusion with people coming onto the island and they haven't been here before and they don't see anybody coming in that middle lane. They're coming onto the island, so they just decide to pull into that lane.
They've done that before. I mean,
Yeah,
there's been,
that's dangerous, isn't it?
Yeah, and somebody in the other direction decides to do the same thing, and, yeah, it's very dangerous. So we're not talking about, in this instance, I agree that what you're talking about can be, for the Carter lane in particular would be interesting, but for what we're talking about now was just having the two lanes off on those busy weekends when we experience gridlock.
But there's other schools of thought, you do know that.
Yeah.
And to, just if you don't mind, the question about the head-on, that's where it becomes intrusive on personnel, or, because we have to have those people there to prevent that from happening.
Yeah.
The cones themselves won't be able to do it, you're right. People will get confused, and some people just run over cones. So we have to have people there to do that. And I will say, when DOT, before they repainted this, when we first started talking about traffic here, and they were coming down to the island, I had a conversation with the director at that time about doing something similar to what you were talking about, the other bridge, and they were not a fan. They said it was too costly to put something like that in place and to manage it, and they were just concerned about, if it didn't work right, the issues and just the ability to put those lights in there with the X's, and they felt like it would not work on this bridge. So we did have that conversation, and they were anti that movement. Rusty?
Well, it seems like, really, what we're talking about tonight is discussion of even engaging a traffic engineer to begin with at 29.5 approximately, to give us some potential options as to what could be done. A lot of discussion, if we decide to go with this ultimately and spend that money, then it's going to be whatever Stantec comes back with. We're going to have to try to get the right people involved in that, whether Stantec can help us with that or not, to be more strategic and get SCDOT and Mount Pleasant to the table, and even Sullivan's Island, if it takes that municipality also, then great. I think it would be money well spent if we felt good that we could do something strategic with whatever comes out of this study. We can sit here all night and argue and talk about what will work and what won't, but we don't know.
We don't know.
We just don't know.
I agree with you wholeheartedly,
Yeah.
Rusty, and we don't know what we don't know, and if we
So,
don't try
so
something
let's,
here.
let's put our thinking cap on and think about whether we want to even pony up this kind of money for a study that's probably right now just going to tell us what we already know.
Would it be, I don't know, you all are on the Public Safety Committee, would you all want to refine this offer before it goes, how do you want to?
Before we vote?
Yeah.
I would rather see us send somebody to talk to Charleston County, Isle of Palms, Sullivan's Island, Mount Pleasant, and the state, and say, all right, guys, we have a problem. It's everybody's problem. We will put up 30 grand towards helping to fix this, but everybody else got to come to the table.
You mean on the 30 or on the post? I don't.
On any of it.
Whatever the
Start the
is.
process of getting people to the table, because spending 30 grand, I think, is a complete waste of money if nobody else is going to participate. we have to have the other players at the table, but we could vote to say, we will fund up to 30 grand to fix this, but only if everybody else is at the table and puts up a proportionate share.
But the 30 is not the fix.
No, oh, no. But that's, at least we get people to the table, is the point, and maybe try to fix something. But just spending 30 grand today, I don't get it.
Well, just another approach would be to spend we do pony up to 30, I guess, or we can certainly ask for help. But then we've got, what I'm understanding is the output is concrete. And we got concrete, they're gonna recommend some concrete solutions. And those solutions are either gonna fly with these municipalities or in the state and the county, or they're not. And if we try to spend the next 6-8 months, or whatever it is, to try to get all these other participants to pony up 5-10 grand on a 30 grand project, we're gonna be talking about this next year.
Right.
And so, if we go to these parties with no concrete solution that we could even evaluate, I think Stantec gives us the credibility. And if especially if the report comes back, they've got concrete solutions, they're at the table with us, with these other municipalities, the state and the county. I think that gives us more heft to say, look, if we want to pursue some of these, we're not doing this alone. And I still go back to the biggest beneficiary of traffic flowing better off this island are not the 4,400 residents on the island, but it's the 30,000 people that are stuck on the island and can't get off. So it is a state or county issue. It's not as much an island pump. So I think we can make a case to ask for the funding. All they can say is no.
So is there, to Scott's original, one of your original questions, is there enough of a tweak in the study that's, because I haven't even looked at it, we just got it late this afternoon, that we need to go back to Stantec for and ask them for a rebid?
I think what we need to do is with these kinds of projects, you change the scope, not the bid. What is it, the scope?
That's what I'm asking.
Yeah.
Is there enough
Yes.
detail there that we need to change the scope and ask for
Well,
something?
I think there's enough need for us, too.
Jan, I heard your comments about needing to verify that they're turning movement counts in their study.
Correct.
I think there are, I don't know that for certain.
It
but
does
there-
not specify it, so
There-
we want to specify it.
Yeah, so I would ask them if that's in there. Also, the
But then
signal study,
you-
I'm assuming that's in there. They are
Nope.
installing cameras and videoing the signal specifically to study it. I don't know, so I would certainly want to ask them those questions to see
Yeah.
if those are in there or if they're not.
What you
And
do
if
is.
they're not, do we want to, I'm assuming that if we add those and they're not already in there, it would increase the price. If they are in there, I could report that back that they are at your council meeting, but I could certainly clarify that between now and the council meeting. I think that I'm hearing that there may not even be interest at 29,500. I guess I'm assuming that if those two parts are not in there, they significantly increase the cost. I think I could assume that it wouldn't be favorably voted upon. So I could get that information and provide it to you at your council meeting, or anything else that you wanted clarification on.
But, I mean, Blair, there's a little bit of chicken and the egg to this whole conversation about, there have been multiple conversations with other parties trying to get people at the table to get to a solution. Now, maybe we don't have the right data or the right information to get there, but, I mean, you can't even get agreement on how the bridge ought to be striped on the island or off the island hardly.
No, I agree with you.
Well, I know, but my point is, do you go ahead and cut, whether it's $25,000 or $30,000, I mean, I think that becomes an IOP expense if we want to go down that path and use it to get to these other parties to have the conversation about solutions.
I
Stantec
don't
has the juice
see
to do
any
that.
report getting them there. They know. I mean, the rifle range light is very obviously a problem. And they know that. They know that the striping of the connector, how it's been restriped, they know that's created a problem. They have no interest in doing anything about it. And so, I mean, to me, we're just wasting money if we don't first get other people to go agree, yeah, there's a problem, let's figure out how to fix it.
Can I ask one more question? It sounded to me like we've engaged Stantec, which we have not done in this study kind of, but they're already open some doors with, they got in touch with the DOT. They had those conversations. They're receptive as long as we get the data there. I mean, that, to me, it seems to me like when we have Stantec behind us or a firm like this with the concrete information, that is going to open the doors to these other municipalities. If we try to do this on our own, they're going to go, well, what are you talking about? And we're going to say, well, we don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We don't know. I mean, I can see that conversation.
I think we've had that conversation.
Yeah, I think we have. And we don't know.
The initial reaction from the general public is, what are y'all doing?
Yeah. Well, they want us to do something, and I think the best way is to hire the expert to tell us.
No, they're
I'm hearing a
laughing.
What we
different
can do.
reaction, Jimmy. I'm hearing from residents that they're tired of the growing volumes on the busy weekends that over the last several years, we haven't even attempted to, I mean, I guess we've attempted through discussion, but we don't have a solution, and we're not, perception I'm hearing is we're not really doing much to it.
Just the last several years?
Yeah.
How about the last 20 years?
No, I'm just talking about the volumes grow, the volumes are continuing to grow. The trend
Yeah.
line
Yeah.
is growing. It's not, I've been here 12 years, it's a lot worse than it was 12 years ago. And it's just getting worse. We got 10 million crossings coming across that connector.
I've been here 40, and it's been a problem every summer that I've been here.
Yep, that's
When
right.
we had one way on and off, and now we have two
Well, I
ways
guess
on
the
and
question
off.
would be,
And we have another 100,000 people over here, but, so it's all relative. It's always been a problem in the
So
summer.
Douglas, you've got a couple of takeaways for Stantec, and we can just bring it back at, sounds like
Okay.
whatever we find, we don't need to kick it back to committee. We just let Douglas go have a conversation with Stantec and come back at our council meeting.
Okay, I've got some suggested wording if you
can
want.
do that outside of here if we can.
Yeah.
Next item, discussion of shark fishing ordinance and guidelines, again, coming out of the Public Safety Committee. Doug, and we've got a draft in our packet,
Yes,
Douglas.
and I'll-
Chief, I'd love to hear your
Yep.
view of life here.
I'll kind of introduce the issue, and then Chief can talk about specifics as he's drafted in your packet is a etiquette guidelines that are heavily borrowed from the town of Seabrook. Those obviously would not be rules, but they would be guidance for people coming across and fishing on our shores. And then also is an ordinance amendment that's in your packet, and it specifically would prohibit chumming for shark. That's the where they put out meat in the water to specifically draw in shark. It would specifically prohibit trot lines, which I don't know that we really have a problem, but that's a common thing in other jurisdictions' ordinances. It would also prohibit intentionally shark fishing between Memorial Day and Labor Day from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. And I'll say that was the result of a Public Safety Committee meeting where the committee was addressed by two shark fishermen that were at the meeting and explaining that they do intentionally fish for shark. They felt like they were doing it safely and at a time that was not interfering with recreational beachgoers. I think the Public Safety Committee was receptive to that request, and that's where the time frame came in. So as written, it would be legal to fish for shark during those kind of off-peak hours. There are other parts in here. The other kind of major issue that was noticed is that people were using drones to cast their lines. They were taking the lines out well offshore with drones and dropping them. This would make that unlawful. The rest of it is kind of detail. Those are the high points. Chief, any other background information?
No, I think this accomplishes the meeting that we talked about and the changes that were brought up in that meeting. And one of the big things that we discussed in a prior public safety was the concern of fishermen fishing when people are swimming present and potential safety issues there. So there is a section in here that was taken from Seabrook's ordinance that gives members of the police department the ability to kind of, hey, stop it and go, hey, this isn't safe, let's all back off and do something a little different just so we can do this safely. Not trying to prohibit anybody from fishing. I think this opens the door to still give them the ability to fish when they want to. And the discussion was brought up about how do you know when they're intentionally fishing for shark? The big thing is chumming, but the other thing is too, if somebody flat out tells me they're fishing for shark and we don't have something in there that says you can't, then I just have to look at them and go, well, you're not chumming, so have a good day. So that's why that first section was added. And again, that was with discussion with it's a group of shark fishermen that actually have this kind of code of etiquette between them that they kind of use, and they talked about the hours that they avoid so that they can minimize interaction between potential shark encounters and people. And the big point too is when you're fishing for shark, you're not really, if you're not chumming and you're just using a typical fishing rod, you're not necessarily drawing anything in that isn't already there. If you're doing it right, you should be cast out far enough, and if they're coming there, they're already there. Now, chumming is totally different. If you're doing that, you're intentionally drawing them there.
Well, and the other thing we also talked about is I think there's been a lot of concern about this, I mean, surf fishing, it's everybody's right to be able to come to the beach and surf fish. I mean, you should be able to do that. We've all done that, I think, probably. You know, you're usually using shrimp, squid, or whatever, or a little cut bait. And you don't know what you're going to catch. I mean, I've caught shark before, small shark, and get them off the line, push them back out there. So someone just doing that as a family activity, or early in the morning, late in the evening, when there's probably not a lot of swimmers and maybe not a lot of surfers out there early and later, when everything's feeding, you're probably not going to have much of a problem. And if you extend the courtesies that most fishermen should do on a beach, you're not going to be casting into a group of swimmers or people on surfboards anyway. You shouldn't be. And I like that we've included that the code enforcement officers do have the right to make a call as to whether they see something that might endanger the public.
Mayor?
Yes, sorry, Blair. Yeah.
I've got a number of issues with this, and I'm the guy that started this. So, and for the public more than anybody else, because I've already sent this around to council, there's an article in Sporting Classics Daily, February 25th, 2020, that talks about the type of fishing that happened in the Horry County area, the Grand Strand area, that is now happening here on our island. And when those fish were caught, those sharks were caught, there were 3 of them that were ultimately caught before Horry County outlawed shark fishing. They're not chumming. They're taking 10, 15-pound hunks of meat. They're paddling them offshore and dropping them already attached to a line on shore. And on shore, they've got heavy tackle, and they wait for a shark to catch that, drag it in. 3 sharks were caught. A 2,000-pound tiger shark, a 1,780-pound tiger shark, and a 1,200-pound tiger shark. And so you've gotten an animal that is massive, that's obviously hungry, and now is very agitated, and you're dragging him to the surf. That's clearly a problem. So that's sort of the genesis of this. The chumming definition, I'm not a fan of, because A, it excludes chicken, B, it talks about only chopped or ground bait being poured into the water, where I have witnessed these people taking 10 and 15-pound hunks of beef, and they paddle it offshore in a kayak 200-300 yards and drop it. Well, that would not meet the definition of chumming, but they're obviously fishing for shark. They're not using trot lines. They're not using drones. They are paddling it out there, and they are advertising online for shark charters from shore, where they are fishing for sharks specifically, and tourists stand there beside them, and if they get a shark on the line, they hand the pole to the tourist, and the tourist drags it in through the surf. They didn't care about any swimmers. They didn't care about anything else. So those were 2 of the issues. Section E under 7.323 says that placement of natural bait upon a hook and line is not prohibited. Well, that's what I just described. That's what these people are doing. They're taking a big hunk of meat, they're putting it on a hook and line, and they're taking it way offshore and dropping it. So I got a problem with Section E as a result of that. And then the time limits for me is a problem. I mean, people are swimming before 10 a.m., they're swimming after 5 p.m., and they swim after Labor Day and before Memorial Day. It just doesn't make sense to me that we want to have people fishing for shark in an area where people are in the water, period. There is a bump offshore at 48th Avenue, roughly. Shrimpers have been using it for years, and a bump means that the sand is higher because it's sand coming from from Dewey's Inlet, and then it falls off, and then it's flat. Well, at that area, the shrimp congregate. Well, when the shrimp congregate there, then the fish congregate. And when the fish congregate, then the bigger fish congregate. And so you're going 200-300 yards offshore and bringing large animals toward shore. And you're training these animals that there's something tasty in that area. And all of that just is fraught with problems, in my opinion. I used to sail out there in that exact area a lot, and there are a lot of shark out there, a lot of small shark. And they would come up and attack the boat. By attack the boat, I mean they'd come up to it and then go away. But every time I was out there, I'd have shark do that because they're checking it out and trying to see what's going on. But if those shark are there, and those are 7-8 foot sharks, and they're going to be the 15-18 foot sharks somewhere out there. So again, that's a problem. And then finally, the Horry County Ordinance, Section 5-7, paren A, closed paren, has some language in there that they've had for a long time that I think is important. And what it says is that all fishermen shall release at time of recognition any and all fish or other animals that pose a danger to beachgoers. So if you know you've got a fish on the line, you cut the line instead of bringing it through the surf. So those are my concerns.
We don't allow commercial shark fishing now.
Yeah, that's correct. I would just say that a lot of what Blair has described is legal, but currently, but commercial operations on the beach is not legal now, and so that's already illegal. But currently, it is legal for everything else. You could chum out there, you could put heavy tackle.
It's also a gray area if they're running a charter or not, because the folks doing it can say, oh no, these are just some friends of mine, they're down for the weekend.
Or where is the transaction taking place?
Right. Yeah.
But if they're advertising online, you can,
No,
that's how we found them in
the
the
folks
past.
advertising online, Chief Cornette sent officers down there, and they said, oh yeah, that's true, but these are just friends of ours from out of town. And there's really very little you could do, because they then look at the people and go, oh yeah, we're friends. And
For what it's worth, I will say that the folks that came to the Public Safety Committee were aware of the commercial operation. They said that operation has left. They felt like that operation was giving the entire kind of, whatever it is, the culture of shark fishermen a black eye. They were happy to see him go. So
Yeah.
that one operation is gone, but it is clearly people who are doing it as sport, and they will come and tell you that we're using big chunks of meat, we're using heavy hardware, we're taking this meat far off in a kayak, just as Blair has described.
to me, it's just fraught with issues. The Citadel Beach Club has a church that does baptisms 5 or 6 times a year in the surf at sunrise. So they're chest deep in water at sunrise, right where people would potentially have been shark fishing all night long.
Well, really what would be considered that would be different than what we already have in place is whether or not you would allow offshore shark fishing the way you described. Taking large hunks of bait out, you know, in a kayak, dropping the line out there, having the large tackle on the shore, and then, you know, reeling it back through the surf. I mean, otherwise, it really seems to all be the same. And the reason chicken was excluded was because you know, you use it for crab traps for the most part, you know, and other ordinances that were looked at, I think Seabrook was one of them. I forget the others that you might have looked at, Chief, but pretty much all of them were, you know, were excluding chicken because of that, because it was more for crab traps than anything.
What difference does it make?
What? What?
You know, I've been listening, and I see both points. I mean, I think overall we need it. I think Blair's points are well taken. In my mind, it just seems like it needs a little bit more work.
Chief, what's your reaction to some of what's been brought up?
Chicken is, I mean, I don't know what they fish with for crabs. I fish, I suck at it. I've caught 5 my entire life, and one was a shark on accident.
And you want to be our ordinance writer.
Right. The part with the live bait, I will say, because when I was fishing, last time I was fishing from Breach Inlet, I was using shrimp, you know, or something like that. And so that was kind of the reason we left some of that in there. And I have caught little fish in there with a net and use that to fish for something and actually just feed it to somebody else or some other fish or something in there. That's why that was left in there. And then I think the concern that I heard coming out of public safety was that there was a concern that we didn't want to come off as prohibiting shore fishing at all, or surf fishing. And I think this was kind of a way that the Public Safety Committee felt that we could accomplish both, was with this wording. And I do get it with the shark fishing. That was a concern, and the group that was here admitted that that's how they deliver their bait is with kayak, and they do take it out and drop it. And so ultimately what we kind of told them is it really just comes down to, is there a feeling to want to pass an ordinance that says you can't shark fish, period, or do you want to allow shark fishing under certain parameters? And that's kind of where they came from this, and I think that's kind of where that conversation fell.
Threading the needle between a no
In
and.
my mind, we need to ban shark fishing, period. If there's blood in the water, large amounts of blood in the water, he's got a big chunk of whatever, sharks become erratic. You know, I've scuba dived, I've surfed, I've sailed a tremendous amount here and other places, and sharks become very erratic when there's blood in the water. I mean, you don't want to, as a surfer, as Douglas knows, if you got another surfer with you and has got a cut on his leg, you don't want to be anywhere near that guy, because it's going to attract predators. And so it just doesn't make any sense to me when we have children and adults in the surf. That's where I come down.
So Blair, I do think that I'm understanding you would want to take away this, Public Safety Committee added a time that you could shark fish. I think you would advocate for striking that back out.
I would.
Sounds like you would also advocate for this section, and I guess there's a difference here. There is chumming, which is just dumping the material into the water. Then what you're describing is putting large hunks of meat actually on a hook. So I think you would advocate tightening E to some amount to, I don't know if it would be the size of the chunk that gets put on the.
Perhaps it's just if you shark fishing, bait on a line and you cast from shore, okay. But if your bait is big enough that you're gonna have to put it on a boat and paddle it out there, you're up to no good.
So you would, I guess you would also advocate for expanding C, which talks about a drone taking it out, and you would expand that to say any method, any way to carry it out farther is prohibited.
But I mean, it kind of says that vehicles and/or drones, I mean, it kind of Pretty broad.
Yeah, I mean, that,
That's
it's unmanned
unmanned
vehicle.
aerial that I misspelled, by the way. That's not Douglas, that's
Yeah.
me. Unmanned aerial vehicles and/or drones, so,
Chief, we're not letting you write an ordinance again.
and I've done it twice.
isn't
so.
that the mermaid aerial, and it has
I
the spells
I
in it?
think so. There's a fork somewhere in this, I'm sure.
So yes, to answer your question, Doug, 'cause that's where I would be. And I would add the language that's in the Horry County ordinance that's been in existence for many, many years, that if you know you have a shark on the line, you cut the line. You don't drag it through the surf. And obviously, there's gonna have to be some judgment calls with police on any kind of enforcement of that, but
But it's written in such a way that allows that.
Yeah.
It
Looks
does.
like
It does get complicated, though, to pull, I don't know what I'm pulling in necessarily.
Right.
no, but
I might
if
think
you're
I
an
got a
experienced
swordfish.
fisherman.
So not me.
And most
You have
are.
a big shark on it, they're gonna know.
Yeah, I would say that probably most people out there surf fishing aren't
Yeah.
experienced fishermen.
Douglas, I would suggest we take this back to committee and have some of this conversation there, if the two
Yeah.
committee people are
Absolutely.
open to that.
Yes, sir. We'll take it. You good with that, Jan?
So,
Yes.
thank you for listening to my rant.
No, it's good. Good point.
Chief, thank you for your work here, and Douglas.
Yes, sir.
Next item is discussion of a hate crime legislation. You will recall, we did a resolution 2 years ago maybe, and sent it to the state legislators in hopes, to the citizen comment earlier, this is absolutely a state issue, in hopes that they were going to pass such legislation. Obviously, that didn't happen. Held out minimal hope that their session, first part of this year, it might happen. Obviously, that didn't happen again, so I think it's prudent, and thank you to the Public Safety Committee for pushing this through. I think we need to go ahead and do something. You know, hopefully the state will get on board at some level, but until then, I don't think there's any downside for us to put something in place. So Douglas, comments are around this.
I would just say that I think this ordinance primarily comes from the Municipal Association model ordinance.
This one was taken from the model ordinance from the Municipal Association and Somerville
What they
city
have in
ordinance.
place, gotcha.
Correct.
Is there any way to consider, I thought Mr. Hooser had quite a few very constructive
Yeah.
considerations that we might want to either add or consider. I don't know, it might be worthwhile to incorporate some of those.
I will say, the question about the penalties for other violations, our city ordinances are written in such a fashion that if there is not a designated penalty for it, they fall under the general penalty that's outlined in Chapter 1 of our city ordinances.
Well, did it say something about if we do a fine, we send it to charity or something, or, I mean,
There
that
are-
seems like an odd, that's an odd one.
There were a couple of areas I felt like it would be good to have MAC take a look,
Yeah.
to include the community service part, because there were some regulations that came from the state about using community service, and just want to make sure we're on the up and up for that. And then the sending it to
A little
somewhere
more
else.
defined,
Yeah,
yeah, exactly, yeah.
That's in here. The one thing I will say is that, and I think this is per the city ordinance, it's punishable by a fine of not more than $500 and/or by imprisonment for not more than 30 days, which I think is all the city ordinances follow that. So that is on top of whatever the ordinance
Second charge.
violation is
Right,
that they're
that's
accused of.
that's the maximum municipal
Right.
charge that we can do. So that would be a second charge on top of the underlying charge.
Okay.
But Mr. Hooser's point was that a lot of our ordinances don't have an underlying charge, so that we can't add on to nothing. I
Yeah, we
guess.
can. We can add $500.
So they all do have a penalty. That's what I was getting at. If they
Yeah.
don't have it explicitly written in the ordinance, it falls under the general
Got it.
penalties ordinance.
Yeah.
Which is $530.
Correct. Same thing.
It gets, after court costs get added to it, it gets to 1,080 something.
1,087.
Yeah.
Rusty.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Well, I thought Mr. Hooser's comments were spot on tonight, too, because he was talking about, from a local standpoint, figuring out how this applies and what implications it has for us as a local municipality. We need to work on that through legal means and understand what that means. But I had asked that it be brought to public safety to begin with when this issue first came up, and it's been out there for years, obviously. We did do the resolution in 2023 that we, as a council, unanimously voted on that resolution to the House of Representatives, the State House, to enforce and support the Clementa C. Pinckney Hate Act resolution. And it passed in the House, but it went to the Senate and it died. It never got out of committee in the Senate, and it still hasn't been brought up again since then. So, but we do have the resolution that we had put in place. All of us sitting around here voted for that, other than Ashley. She wasn't on council at the time, but it was unanimous. I think, to Mr. Hoosier's point also, that you can look at this and say, the message we send, I mean, you may look at it and say, okay, it's a feel-good message and that's all it's going to do. But I think the most important thing is we join at least 17 other municipalities and counties who are already have put something like this in place, trying to encourage the state to address this. And I think that's where the most important thing we can do is to really join with them, lend our voices to that effort, and look at an ordinance that we can pass here locally that just really supports that.
I agree with you. I think most of the serious crime ordinances are governed by the state. We don't have, it's mostly minor issues here, but to take a stand to say that we're not going to tolerate any kind of hate misdemeanors, if you want to call them that, but like you said, graffiti or other acts of violence, it's just, I think it's very important for us to make sure that we're on the right side of this.
So Chief or Douglas, could we have Mac take a look between now and council and based on comments and conversation here tonight?
Yep, we'll do that.
Thank you. Next item, more of a housekeeping item, discussion of changing parking requirements at 41st Avenue and the city marina. You've got a couple of page document in your packet.
Yes, I would say this is, this is a housekeeping provision. The city's parking standards codes allow for trailer parking of residents in the area that used to be ditched between Waterway Boulevard and the marina. That area specifically, trailers could pull alongside of it, and that provision made sense at the time. Since that time, we have changed the orientation of those parking spaces to be perpendicular to the road, so that a car with a trailer or a truck with a trailer cannot pull in perpendicular and keep the trailer out of the road. And if they park parallel, they're using up 4 or 5 different spaces. So we did have an incident where this happened. I don't think it was residents that did it, but it elevated itself to, it showed us that we do have this issue still in the ordinance where it specifically allows trailers in those spaces that don't fit trailers. So this would clean that up.
One question about trailer parking at the marina now. With the revised layout for that shared parking lot, there were going to be 7 or 8 trailer parking spaces and that added to that area. Now that we haven't revised that shared parking area, are the trailers, the vehicles with trailers attached still allowed to park in that shared parking lot?
Yes,
Just
yeah,
just like it has been.
yeah, there are 10 or 11, depending on how tightly you park, 10 or 11 trailer spaces in the shared area of that property
Okay.
that are there now and continue to be available to park trailers. In addition to the marina added, I think it's 7 or 8 on the left side of the ramp as you're pulling out of the ramp.
Uh-huh.
So there are still spaces down there.
And
Yeah.
then
This
inside,
issue is just dealing with the piped ditch along 41st.
yeah,
That's all we're talking about
I
tonight.
just want to make sure that there are alternatives to parking
are.
in that area, that
For trailer parking.
trailer
Yeah,
parking.
specifically. There are definitely. Other questions for Douglas on that one? Thank you, Douglas. Next item is environmental update on offshore drilling. We got notice kind of late that this was back on the table again. 60-day public comment period has already happened and closed. But on behalf of the South Carolina Beach Advocates, there was a opposition letter put in. You see Senator, or Representative Mace letter was included in the packet. Senator Campson also put in a letter of opposition. Governor also sent in a letter of opposition. So supposedly how this is going to work, if South Carolina stays in the mix of being considered for offshore drilling, there'll be another 60-day comment period in the future where we can take more council action as opposed to on, with the beach advocates, or I may not put in a personal comment, but that was just as a resident, not as elected official. So we'll have an opportunity, if South Carolina stays in the mix, to do something more formal at a later date. So more to come on that one. Questions or comments? And IOP had already passed, I think it was 2015 or 16, there was a resolution opposing this. Cronin was the mayor at the time.
We were the first community in South Carolina to pass it. The first.
Next item is personnel, discussion of employee vacation buyout policy. You've got this in your packet, Douglas, or?
Yeah, this is coming as a result of the budget process. This is baked into the budget that's been approved, and it would increase the amount of leave that an employee could cash out from $1,000 to $2,000. That is included currently in the city handbook and policy, and this would amend that. And I think we already have a couple of employees that have made that request to us. So before we pay them, we would want that change to be made in the handbook.
And this would require a council vote to do
Yes.
that. Questions or comments?
Is there any concern with this in people not taking vacation? Because I think it's important that, in my prior life, we would force people to take at least a week of vacation.
Well, that's why they have to have 10 days sitting on the books to even qualify to do the payout. So they have to leave 10 days on the books.
So they've taken some.
Correct.
Before they can do this.
Correct.
The buyback.
Thank you.
Do those 10 days ever, do they expire?
They do, so they, if they don't use, they have 30 days is the cap, and if they don't use that by the end of December, the overage goes away.
Okay.
So this will help with that as well.
Kind of use it or lose it.
You got it.
Yeah. Yeah, there's much more employee-friendly policy.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you, Janice, for bringing this
Thank
to
you.
us. Item E, other items for discussion. Discussion of revised ordinance 2025-05, amending the trigger for business license revocation. You've got a new red line in your packet, Douglas.
Yep, and this,
Our committee member.
this came through council, went back to the Public Safety Committee.
Yep.
The edits in your packet specifically they detail that rollout cart violations would not count as a strike against a business license, so that came from the committee. The other change it's really a clarification to ensure that this ordinance change doesn't have the effect of starting to count violations that would have otherwise fallen off somebody's tracking window. So that's the change in section 2.
Which we talked about in
Yeah.
council thing, yeah.
Yeah, kind of a timing thing, and then the other one is specifically not counting rollout cart violations
Can I
as
ask you a
strikes.
couple of questions on it?
Sure.
If you look in the title, I'm not sure that's been updated. Should it be struck
yes.
after where it says complaints before a revocation hearing, period, I guess, and stipulate that 2 garbage rollout complaints to be counted as one? Shouldn't that be struck out?
Yes, it should. It should
Okay.
stipulate that garbage rollout cart complaints are not counted.
And then in section 1, item F, do we need to, if we're not going to be counting garbage cans as a founded complaint, do we need to say that they're not going to be counted? I mean,
Yeah,
it
everything
seems to me
else is
like-
everything is, so prior to this, everything was counted. If you had a strike, any violation was counted. And that's the way that it will continue to work with it. Now, the one exception to that is rollout carts. But everything else is counted as a strike.
Okay, so where it says garbage rollouts, okay, it's recycle, and it shall not be counted.
Not be counted.
Okay, got
So
it.
that's the only one that
So that's
does
good.
not get counted.
Okay, so it's just the title then.
Yep, the
And so
title
Doug-
should be,
yeah, and so
should be
this is
corrected.
Coming back for second reading.
That's correct.
End of the month.
That's correct.
Scott, sorry, did you have another?
No, I think,
Question.
yeah, and it's just recast it back to January 20, okay.
That's
No,
correct.
we're good. Okay,
Yeah.
thanks.
Yeah, 'cause I think Mac brought the timing conversation up that we had there.
Good job, good job.
Last item is legislative report, update on kickoff meeting with Thorn Run Partners. You'll recall, this is our federal lobbyist that we hired in conjunction, in partnership with the IOP Water and Sewer Commission. So we met with three representatives from Thorn Run, two folks from the Water and Sewer Commission were here. Discussed the primary funding needs for each. Obviously, with the Water and Sewer Commission, it's expanding the sewer on the island and as well as some probably aging water infrastructure pieces. For us, it's beach renourishment and stormwater and drainage infrastructure. I think what's going to be my two takeaways from the conversation with the federal lobbyists, we've had our state lobbyists now for 4 years, I guess. I think with the federal level, there's going to be significant more pre and post request documentation and follow-up after reporting. So this is going to be a staffing issue at some point, depending on, how much activity we have or have the opportunity with at a federal level. It's significantly more with the state. We decide as a council what our priorities are. We fill out minimal paperwork for our lobbyists to go do their thing, and then there's a little bit of paperwork after typically. Federal, I think that's going to be a whole different level of reporting pre and post. So that was one takeaway. The other was kind of the timing of funding, timing of projects. Current administration wants a kind of a local cost share arrangement, which makes total sense from a buy-in standpoint. But at the same time, you want shovel-ready projects. Well, that's a chicken and the egg conversation to go through all the permitting when you think about what we have to do, or design and engineering to permitting to being ready to put a shovel in the ground. You better already have funding lined up. Well, at a federal level, it sounds like they want, proof of concept, a completely designed project ready. So this one's going to be a little bit unique to me. And just to give you an example, Douglas mentioned it earlier, the Water and Sewer Commission project in the basin up at 38, comes back, they've got a 4 or 5, whatever $1 million shortfall. One of the takeaways from our lobbyist is that's the type of thing they can grab and go plug that hole, if you will. So it's shovel ready, it's designed, it's ready to go. We just have a cost issue. Those are the type projects they're looking for, or initiatives they're looking for. Our lobbyist would be to help plug that hole. So it's going to be interesting. May affect the timing of some projects on how fast or slow or quick we can make things happen. But when these bids are coming back at such a different pace, that's where they think they can make a difference and go to our federal legislatures and hopefully get us some help. So
You might be able to do like with a large project is do phasing. And when you have the first phase design, go for the funding with second and third phases down the way and push it. They would know how to work
Yeah.
that better.
yeah, they had some interesting ideas on the Douglas.
Yeah, they did. I mean, to your point, one of my takeaway as well is they said they really want that money spent the year that it gets allocated, which for us it's a challenge. I mean,
It's hard.
Yeah.
to get it, can't even get a permit within a year, never mind, get it done in a year. So that was a change.
But the project, Waterway would be one that is getting up there in price.
That's right.
Yeah,
That's a
Keeps
perfect
getting
example
pushed
where
down.
we
Yeah.
have the plans, have the permits.
Yeah.
But I think it's going to be, it seems as though there will be some just chance as to whether or not the bucket is there at the right time, the project needs the funding. So a
Yeah.
little bit less kind of sure and planned, but they seem very positive about their ability to get the funding when we need it.
Yeah, that would be nice, yeah.
There being no further business.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Off record at 6:43.